Okay, in the first part of lesson 2, we're going to use the storyboard for a little bit. So I'm going to go more in depth on the storyboard later in the series here. But first, just hit this little button up here. It's your library, and you can go up there, and in here you can type. There's all kinds of different things that you drag and drop onto the field here, and we're going to create our first Hello World app. So it just pops up and says Hello World. It's kind of standard convention to do that when you're learning a new coding language. So let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing we want is a label. And all we do is we just click it and just drag and drop. And we're not going to worry about constraints and everything being in the apps, but I do want to show you how. So see, when we go down to see how it's not centered anymore, that's why we're going to need constraints down the road. Okay, and for this label, we want to attach it to the view controller here. So we're going to click on this, which is the assistant editor, and it's going to pop up the view controller automatically. See here, automatically that's associated with the highlighted view controller over here in the storyboard. It's all like, big words and stuff, but basically a view controller, it's literally defined as a controller that handles a view. So it's they're basically like, we're trying to be self-explanatory here, but yeah, even though they use big words. And so we're going to do a control drag, and we're going to drag it over here. I'll say insert outlet or outlet collection, and we're going to create an outlet. And so it's a UI label. We want that. We want weak. I'll explain weak and strong variables. And so now we want a name for it. It's just going to be, let's just do text label. And when you're typing in Swift and in most other languages, you want to use Camel Case, which is where you lowercase the first thing and then you uppercase every next word, because you can't have spaces. So see, even for this function, view did load, they all do it like that. They think overrides one word. I don't know. Do you guys think overrides one word? But yeah. So now we've linked up our IB outlet, and so this will show up if we turn on the app. So what we're in right now is we're in a class. That's what a view controller is. And before we go any further, I just want to go over like some classes and variables and functions and explain what they are, because this is a variable and this is a function and this is a class. So let's get a little better idea of what they are. And most of the coding in Swift is done in classes. They're used to create the objects. So basically, it's like a blueprint. I like to work in a home analogy, because in a past life I was in real estate, and it's kind of like the blueprint. Like you're not building it yet, but you have an idea of what you want it to look like. And in this one, for example, a view controller, you see class view controller and then UI view controller. If we just add a class, which one thing I love about Swift is that it auto-completes stuff like this. Have the name and then the superclass. So that relates to this. Let's delete that. But that relates to this because this is the superclass for this view controller. So UI view controller is a class that is already made by Apple that contains things like the view did load function. That view did load, all it does is when the view is loaded. Which for view, view they mean the screen here. And when the view is loaded, what's it going to do? So that's what we have there. And now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about these variables. And so there's a lot of stuff here. Don't worry, the more you use it, the better you'll understand it. And it comes in two basic forms. The variables are represented by var in Swift. And the thing is, they can be changed. So the constants are represented by let, and they cannot be changed once you create them. So let's just use this in an example. So we want to say, let's just say, let our text equal, and then you want to put quotes around it because it's a string, and strings we'll get to in a second. But let our text equal hello, or yeah, hello. And then down here, we want to change it to say our text equal hello world. And cannot assign property to our text. It's a let constant. Change let to variable to make it mutable. That's the word, that's the big boy word they use for it can be changed. It's mutable or it's immutable. And I love the auto, it's almost got like autocorrect for developers. Like it says, here, we'll offer to change it to a variable. Which is great. And so now we have that. And it's letting us do it now because this is changed to a variable. So why, you ask, would you ever use a let constant? Well, constants take up less memory, and that's basically it. And that, you know, they're looked at one time and they stay the same, so that you don't have to go back and look in the memory for that piece every time you load it. Now, I do want to just give you some data types that you can use if you want to use numbers or things in your app. Here, so this is a data type, and Boolean is bool, described as bool in the Swift documentation. And that's what they are. All these things are what the Swift documentation uses. And so they're true or false statements. So it's really easy for a computer to understand 0 or 1, true or false. These are old as time, you know, these commands, the Boolean statements. Integers are whole numbers. Floats are decimal numbers. So it depends. You know, they have these differences because a float takes up more space than an integer, and a double takes up even more space than a float, which is a double takes up exactly twice as much. So to go deeper, it's like 64-bit number, and that's a 32-bit number. And then strings are words and other text that you use. And then character is, you know, something that's really common in other languages, but yeah, the thing is, it's not used as much in Swift. I don't come across it very often, but just, you know what it is when you see it. It's a good way if you're numbering, if you want to, you know, rate things by number, or you know, do things like decrypt thing. I've had to work with that before. It's a challenge that you'll see in coding interviews and stuff where you have a decryptor. But yeah. Let's go back to the app. Now what are we looking at? We're looking at this view did load, and it says when it opens up, let's close out of the assistant editor here. It says when things open up, it wants to say hello world. But when we run it, let's just go ahead and run it. Let's just see what it does. And by the way, guys, it may take a while for your simulator to open. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your computer. The simulator just takes forever. I mean, these phones run on like super fast processors, so it's got to simulate this processor. But as you can see here, it just says label. Why doesn't it say our text? Because we haven't linked these two right here. If you guys ever did, like in elementary school, and recently in a coding class I was taking, the professor did a review of showing how to use create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich from scratch with very explicit instructions. And it's very hard to just lay out exactly how to do it. But when you're working with a computer, if you're new to development, you have to kind of think like a computer. You have to think, so if I don't make this explicit, the computer will not do it because it won't. And you know, it's not just going to understand our text, it should just go up there. So we have to make it equal. And this text label, you can see by this little bullet here, is linked by an IB outlet to the storyboard. And it's linked to the label that we dragged, of course. And so we're going to take the text label here in the viewDidLoad, which viewDidLoad is a function basically showing when it loads again. And we're going to set it to our text. Let's see what happens here. Oh, you can't assign the value string to the label. That is actually because the UI label is it's similar to the class structure up here. This is the so this is the subclass. This gets its functions like viewDidLoad are preloaded from the UI view controller superclass. So in the same sense, this text label here is preloaded from the UI label class. So all their or the enum. So all their all the functions within it, you have to highlight the text label and then hit dot, and then here's everything that you can change in a UI label. And you see you have a lot of freedom to work with here. But for right now we want the text attribute. And so that just changes the text. You can change everything through the code, and it's I love how deep this library is. And so you see we have our first little bug here. We want it to say hello world, but it's not stretching out, and that's because we weren't explicit. And no, don't ban me, YouTube. I'm not being explicit. I'm being absolute. You need absoluteness, I guess. Not explicitness. No dirty things here. And so let's just drag this out because it's pretty obvious that we just ran out of room. But that just goes to show, like, you have to be exact. So let's run it one more time. No pressure though. So okay, we're going to open it up, and it says hello world. There's ways to center it and everything, but look, we just got started. It's going to get more complicated from here, so just give yourself a pat on the back right now and get ready to get going more. And I wanted to close this second part of the lesson out by just talking a little bit more about variables and functions. And if we go back to our building a home analogy, and you can get these slides, so I'm just kind of reading off the slides, but I like to think of variables as the building materials. Like you have, a label or, or your text field or whatever. There's, text fields, image views, blah, blah, blah. We'll get there. But that's your building blocks for, you put those in the right order and you put them with functions and you get the right thing done. Now functions are more like a set of instructions that you can call upon that are, you pull it out and it gets the job done. And they're initialized by the func keyword, as we saw in the function viewDidLoad. And functions can relate to other functions within them. So let's say I like to do this just to keep it organized. So let me just show you how this works. Real quick, we want to create our first function. Yeah. Change text. And we want to just do all this stuff. And in a function you have to have the parentheses. And I want to just we'll cut, actually. Let's just cut all that and put it in here. And now just, I'm kind of a neat freak about all this, keeping this stuff organized. And then here we can call change text, and let's see how that goes. All right, and it still did it, and we're on the right track. So you can check out the slides online. I'll leave the link down there. They're pretty lame, so I don't blame you if you don't want to use them, like a couple of sentences. But on the other hand, I hope the video was really helpful to you. The next step, we're going to get closer to building a fully fledged app, which is our quotes app, and I haven't forgotten about it. Just wanted to get the hello world out of the way and get going. Now that you have a basic understanding of you know, how to build an iPhone app, because you literally, this is an iPhone app, what we just had. I mean, it's a crappy one, but it's an iPhone app. So, you know, great job, guys. Check out the next one.